Hesha Abrams. Love talking to Hesha. Where do I start? She's a mediator, so she does corporate mediation, but she wrote a great book. I mean, talking about just interacting with people and holding the calm, how to communicate with others, how to mediate when you're, at the dinner and you have the one uncle who's a jerk and wants to bring up certain things. How do you level and empower them? And great techniques, VUCS, VUCS, VUCS him or her. Wait till you hear what that's about. I'll give you the first an acronym, and it's validate. You'll get the other three when you listen to it. But spaghetti sauce, a great analogy about, when you talk, when there's conflict, spaghetti sauce spills, you wipe it up right away, no issue. You let it sit for a day, you can get it, but it doesn't, it takes a little effort. But if you let it sit for a long time, it takes a long, so the analogy is with mediation and just relationships and just talking with others. I open up asking her the difference between listening and hearing, which is the foundation, I believe, of great conversation and relationships. But great techniques. You'll learn so many just quick techniques about how to work with people when there's conflict and when there's that tension, asking simple questions, the dinosaur method. Wait to hear about that. Sandwich technique as well. Great conversation. You're going to love this. It goes by I can't believe it was, an hour, but Hesha is wonderful. Get her book, understand what it's like to mediate. It's just a wonderful conversation with Hesha. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Hesha Abrams, thank you so much for doing this. I'm very excited to talk to you. In mediation, what's the difference between listening and hearing?
What a fantastic question. Listening is hearing your words, and it's like skimming over the surface. Hearing is having a submarine and going deep. What's being said? What's not being said? How's it being said? That's how I'm pretty good at detecting a liar. And, people will look at you and smile and their mouths are moving. And what they're really wanting to communicate or what they're really thinking is not the words that are coming out.
Interesting. Submarine, getting down into it. That's very interesting. Just because, I often have conversations with close ones and I could just tell when they're hearing and when they're listening. It's just a very big, some people are kind of waiting to talk and they're not really listening. And it's frustrating. So in mediation, that's really important. Thus, we need to VUCS it out.
You read the book. I'm so impressed. Excellent. And I would say it's not just mediation. The title of the book is longer than I would have liked, and I did it on purpose. It's Holding the Calm, the Secret to Resolving Conflict and Diffusing Tension. And the reason I did that is all conflict, 100% of it starts with tension every single time. And yet we don't diffuse it because we're scared. We don't know how. We didn't really hear. And when you said some people aren't really listening, they're arguing in their head, I wouldn't say some, I'd say most. And the more tense the conversation, the more they're not really listening to you. They're rehearsing what they want to say, even if they're being polite and waiting. And we want to know the number one trick, how to change the dynamics of that when you sense it happening in a interpersonal, professional, community, religious. Because when I do mediation, it's just human beings bumper carring egos into each other. You say to them, I want to make sure we're on the same page. What do you think I said?
Hmm.
And if they weren't listening, you're going to go backpedal, 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 backpedal. It's what will happen. And then I'm not sure I heard all of it. Would you mind telling me again? Now they're listening.
Right. All
And,
too often. Oh, sorry.
and I can give you the corollary of that. Let's say someone's talking to you and they're real long-winded. And honestly, you kind of drifted off and you didn't really hear everything they were saying, but you want them to feel heard. All you got to do is repeat the last 3, 4, 5, 6 words that they said. That's it. So you get done with this big, long soliloquy. And all I have to say, and that's why you felt they didn't get it. Because those are the last 5 words you said. And you're going to go, yeah, you get it. It's a great trick and it works really well.
Yeah. I know what I said, but what did you hear? That kind of conversation can raise some tension, perhaps, because they may hear something very different than perhaps not what I said or what somebody said, but what they intended. So you need to kind of be clear. The English language just sometimes can cause these kinds of problems, or just attention deficit, perhaps.
Correct. And you can see, like I'm an expert at reading body language, but you can see it. You're talking and all of a sudden the person goes, okay. So clearly I offended you. I insulted you. I annoyed you. I'm like, oh. So what most people do is they just plow forward longer, louder, more. Oh, no, au contraire, mon cher. No, you be like a bomb detector, like that guy that waddles out in his Michelin suit. He didn't just start cutting wires. He looks, he diagnoses what's there. So something like that happens. I stop and say, I'm afraid, did I somehow offend you or upset you? Because that wasn't my intention. Now the other person has to say, oh, well, it's nothing. I'm having a bad day.
Right.
Or, well, when you said da do da da do, you didn't mean da do da da do, did you? And then I say, oh, good God, no. And now all of a sudden you've got this level of conversation. And if I can give your listeners, I feel like I should write a book called Spaghetti Sauce at this point, because
Yeah,
it's my number one analogy.
there
You
is.
drop spaghetti sauce on the counter, you wipe it right up. You leave it overnight, you're scraping it off with a spatula. You leave it 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 years, it's old and moldy and nasty. Now it can still get resolved, it can still get clean. It's just that much more work. So if we can learn these holding the calm tips and tricks and tools to wipe the spaghetti sauce up when it's wet, God, wouldn't life be better? Wouldn't it just be? Because I'm an expert in this, and I could just be tired, cranky, whatever, and just say something. So you got to learn how to backpedal, and you got to learn how to say, that didn't come out the way I wanted to. Can I have a do-over? Who says no to that? Now, do it again. And then the other person's really going to feel heard.
I'm from the Northeast, and both my parents are immigrants, and a lot of my friends were parents were immigrants. So I was very used to having non-English speaking around me. And when you don't understand it, you're drawn to the body language and to the inflection. You don't need to understand the words to know what's happening. If it's loving, if it's abrasive, you can just kind of tell just by that. So you learn there. So you kind of can make your assumption correctly when you're in these mediation. I mean, Hesha, you dealt with the biggest Fortune 500 companies, and you're talking about billions of dollars, and you're mediating with them. Are these, I'm going to assume, mostly men? Follow those same kind of tactics where they're sitting back and they're easily offended, and is it like children? Is it like a family dynamic as well in those business settings?
It is. It's so interesting, but, you're still but you're in a $1,000 suit with a
Right.
$30,000 Rolex on your hand,
Watch, yeah.
right? But it's still bumper car egos, and
Mm.
it's very interesting. Daniel Kahneman, who was a he's still alive, is a psychologist, but he won a Nobel Prize in economics. And that's for proving that Adam Smith's rational man, that people make rational decisions, was wrong. And that governed economic policy for
Wow.
for 100 years or more. And he proved it mathematically and he showed. And one of the things that was so interesting is that we think, especially in a hard nosed negotiation, it's tough, it's hard. I don't care if it's two neighbors arguing over whose cat peed on the rug, or whether it's one of these big Fortune 100 people that I deal with that we're arguing over $1 billion. I mean, I just did a $1 billion case last week. I mean, this kind of stuff happening, it's still, my ego and my ego. And what we think, it's that I want to win. But Daniel Kahneman proved 80% of the time, it's I don't want to lose.
Mm.
Completely different analysis. So if someone's punching hard, they may be loud, they may be aggressive, or they may be pulled back and and refusing to speak. It may be I don't want to lose. And I call it my Hesha's corollary to that. No one wants to be a putz. I did a deal that was stupid, and I'm going to get judged for it in the future that it looked like like a stupid deal. I paid too much, I paid too little. I let something get away from me. Who's going to stick their neck out to do that? Oh, 15 or 20% of us, and of the most aggressive entrepreneurs, but not the 80%. The 80% want to do the right thing, want to get a good deal, want to get an attaboy. And there's, the old adage in business is that one aw shucks wipes out five attaboys.
Mm.
And so you got to be real cautious with that. So when I'm talking to people,
Wow.
I'm hearing the content of whatever it is that they're saying, and I'm listening below the lines in my submarine. Okay, that's fine. But I'm also looking at the person. What's the soft, gooey center that person's trying to protect? And sometimes the louder and more aggressive someone is, the more precious and vulnerable is the soft, gooey center. The people that are quiet and steadfast are actually more difficult to deal with. And so then once you can start figuring out what the interests are, I mean, my big belief is that you identify self-interest and you align them. That's how you get to a deal.
Hmm.
And that's how you get to a deal that sticks and that stays. And I have whole chapters in the book about how to do that, how to get to it, how to find it, how to get past roadblocks and barriers to understand that, because that's where deals are made, not based on what you tell me you need or want. That's honestly
Mm.
irrelevant. I got to find out what your self interest is. And then I got to align it with mine. That's how we make a deal.
Hmm. And in those settings, you're not afforded the luxury of the two-year-old spaghetti sauce, right? You have to kind of fast track that.
hmm And sometimes, there's a history. And that
Mm.
just means you got 2-year-old spaghetti sauce you got to manage and deal with, because I don't trust a word that comes out of your mouth.
Right.
And you think I'm the devil incarnate. Okay, that just means I got to manage something. It's a card in the deck. We got to manage it. But what's so interesting is that there's, again, all these. I read tons of books on neuroscience and psychology, and because it's the land in which I live. You can take two complete strangers and you can make them enemies or best friends, and it takes like an hour. And then they can probably even do it really in a half an hour if you trigger enough things. Our brains as human cavemen and cavewomen are wired to be Hatfields and McCoys, us versus them. We're wired to do that. And there was this fascinating study that was done where they took, this was a long time ago where you couldn't do that stuff now because it really isn't, considered that ethical. But at the time, 20, 30 years ago, the field of psychology was still evolving, behavioral psychology. And they took a bunch, I think they were 9-year-old boys, and I think there were, 20 of them. They divided them randomly, and you're the blue shirts and you're the red shirts. And that's it. They put them in different camps. And then and bunkhouses in the camp, and started stoking them with, ugh, those red shirts, ugh, those blue shirts. And it took a day before the boys were hating each other, stealing from each other,
Wow.
plotting. I mean, one day for actual us versus them mentality and hatred. And the researchers thought, "Oh, geez, oh God, this has gotten out of control. What are we going to do? How are we going to fix this?" Because it was really bad. And what we know in the field of psychology, and I know in my work, is that jointly working on oppressive problems and difficult problems creates bonding.
Hmm.
That's why integration in the armed forces was the best thing that happened in this country for integration, because you're under severe fire. And so black, white, tall, Mexican, who cares? You're
Yeah.
soldiers. You bleed green. And they had to help and support each other. So what they did with these boys is they put them all on a bus. The red shirt sat in the front and black and blue shirt sat in the back. Then they had a flat tire and got stuck in the mud that was orchestrated.
Mm.
All the boys had to get out, and they had to push, and they fell in the mud, and they're pushing, and before you know it, in like 2 hours, they're laughing and joking with each other,
Wow.
and those red shirts really aren't so bad. Those blue shirts are maybe okay. So, psychologically, we could do a lot of damage, and we can undo it. It's just the conflict of, humanity, and that's why communication is the music of humanity. And I've got a quote on that in the book because
Yes, you
when
do.
it's done well, God, it's Mozart. And when it's done poorly, it's fingernails on a chalkboard. And that's why we need these tools. That's why I wrote this book because I've been doing this like 35 years.
Yeah.
And late at night, I'm doing some $1 billion deal, and some CEO is talking to me about his kid's soccer coach and what a idiot he is, and asking me for how to handle that. It's the human being piece. And I thought everybody needs these tools. And that's why I'm literally putting these secrets and things out there so that normal, regular people, we can use them in our relationships, our families, our communities, and wipe the spaghetti sauce up when it's wet.
It's so fascinating you mentioned conflict. Some of my best friends that I have now, when I originally met them as a, 10, 12-year-old, we had a fist fight. We had fights, and then you just turn. I don't know if that's a male thing or not. Another great thing that you talk about, when I'm having perhaps a conflict or discussion with a loved one, I kind of use the tool, why do I love this person? I ask myself, and then it turns around. You do the same thing as would you save their child out of a burning car, just to kind of, humanity, make everybody a human and put everybody on the same plane. It's such a simple exercise, but so worthwhile when having these kinds of conflictive discussions.
You're so wise because, I have an amygdala just like you. I just
Mm,
have 40 years of practice, so I have a long wick, on my dynamite, but I'm tired, I'm cranky, I'm scared, you poke me hard enough,
mm,
rah, I'm gonna roar, and so what I found is that it wasn't really until I wrote the book and titled it that way, because I just did different things in my head. I started using holding the calm as a mantra or a talisman or a rabbit's foot. So when I'm tense, I'm stressed, I'm cranky, my hormones are out of whack, you piss me off, you're getting in my way, whatever. I literally will just close my eyes for 2 seconds and say, "I'm holding the calm. I'm holding the calm.
mm,
I'm holding the calm." And what it does is it doesn't just calm me down. When people say, take a deep breath, it actually doesn't work.
mm,
And the question is, why doesn't it work? Because when your amygdala is triggered, you, by definition, feel powerless. And so if somebody else takes power, take a deep breath, calm down, don't do that. All you're doing is activating more feeling powerless. So people will either fight, flight, or freeze. They'll run away, they'll fight, or they'll go, I don't know what to do. So if you use a mantra, mine is holding the calm because it's just so easy and it's the book and the tools. What it does is it creates a moat between my emotions and me. And it takes 2 seconds. And in that moat, I regain power. Now, I have a choice here. How do I choose to react? What do I choose to say? I'm not just going to spit something out or run away. I have a choice. And when you give, and that's a trick I do for myself, and I
mm,
tell people to do it, but it's the same thing if you're in a situation where it's getting hot. With some, it's just whatever. It's getting hot for
mm,
whatever reason. I guarantee you the other person is feeling powerless, that you are somehow taking away their power,
mm.
overpowering them, and so they're reacting. So give them some power. when clients hire me to handle negotiations for them, or I'm doing a mediation, or I'm doing a pro bono helping, somewhere, I try to give the other guy some power. When should we meet? What do you want to have for lunch?
Mm.
Where do you want to sit? Is the air conditioning good? What music should we play? What issues do you want to start talking about? Is there anything you'd like to make sure I understand that you think maybe I don't?
Hmm.
Now, people will look at that and go, oh, that's just so good. She's communicating well. Okay, yeah, but not really. What I'm really doing is I'm giving them power. And what does giving them power do? Calm the amygdala the heck down. Now maybe I can get somewhere and we can do something. Don't see me as foe, see me as friend, even if we're across the negotiating table.
When you talk about holding the calm, I think of George Costanza when he yells "Serenity now" in Seinfeld.
That's so funny. Yeah. Yeah.
But he did a little angrily. But you mentioned about giving power back, and what you're essentially doing is asking questions, is asking questions and giving them the power. That's the Socratic method of learning, right? Just by asking questions. So when you're talking to somebody about that, you're shifting the power over in that way, and that's really wise and really levels the playing field. Thus, we get into VUCS, right? Validate, understand, clarify, and then summarize. Let's talk about VUXing.
So the reason I think I love that you read the book and you paid attention to that. Thank you for that. I invented that and named it purposefully
Mm,
because when you're upset with someone, you just vuck them.
VUC them.
Tell them to
Yeah.
vuck themselves. And the reason I do that is because our listeners aren't gonna forget it now. It's not just
Mhm.
some silly little stupid acronym I came up with. When you tie it when I was in law school and I had to memorize 9,000,000, the elements of an easement and the elements of a UCC 9 claim and all that stuff. Most people, you invent little sexy, weird ditties because that
Right.
those things stick in our heads. So that's why I did, you just vuck them. And it starts everything beautifully because what happens is I'm annoyed with you or you're annoyed with me. Blame and judgment is just a carrier wave that
Mm,
happens on whatever it is you said. And that whole chapter in the book, the blame, defend, justify, death dance. Because you blame me unless I'm super mature and I'm
mm,
super able to hold the comment, step back and go, oh, what did you mean by that? Which 95% of the time does not happen because we're human beings and we have flat foreheads because we bash our faces against the wall, So, um, being able to step back is such a key. So, what's the first thing in the V for validate is validate. But I always give listeners the advanced course. Let's say I can validate you. I know you're a good person, Joey. I know you really care about whatever the issue we're trying to deal with. I know you didn't intend to hurt me. I know you're not a liar or cheat the way the other guy says you are, blah, 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 right? Let's say you can do that. Fabulous. You should do that. But let's do the advanced class. What if I hate your guts?
mm,
What if I don't trust you? I can't find anything to validate about you because I dislike you. I don't trust you. I don't understand you. I think you're wrong. You're stupid. You're a moron. Fill in the blanks. The simple trick is you name the emotion.
hmm,
So I can say, you're very passionate about that. This is a very intense issue for you. You seem very committed to your position. That's validating because
mm,
what's the other person going to say? Yeah, you see me. Yeah, you bet I'm passionate about this. Now it's easier for me to say, help me understand. Tell me more. How beautiful is that? Now I've given them power. I've seen them. I've heard them. I've created space for them. And I'm getting free information
mm,
that I didn't have to pay for. How fantastic is that? Right? Then you go, that's the validate stuff. It's the WD-40 of interpersonal relations. And I have a friend whose son is a chef, and he said that his son says that bacon is the duct tape of food. If you screwed up a meal, you throw
right.
bacon in there, which I laugh because I'm vegetarian, but I think that's just hilarious, right? Validation. Now, this is the key. People will listen and they'll validate poorly. Oh, that's a nice dress. Oh, that's not so good. Or,
Mm.
you said that really well. Pandering. Oh, no. So you have to get good at validating. And the
Yes.
way you get good at validating is you acknowledge who and what the person is.
Mm.
You worked really hard on that project. You know, I was actually just helping a client who was having a problem with an employee, and she said to her, "But you're brilliant, you're brilliant." And the employee kind of shriveled, and I stopped it and I said, "You think you're validating, aren't you?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Look at her face." I said, "You've scared her."
Mm.
She knows she's not brilliant. She doesn't want to be brilliant. What she wants to be told is that she's competent and that she is doing a good job. And the employee looked at me and went, "Yes, yes." So you don't put the same bait on the hook to everybody. It's, you know, if you're
Interesting.
lactose intolerant, why would I shove ice cream at you?
Mm.
If you're gluten free, why would I shove pizza at you? I mean, I have to take a minute to see you, right? What can I give you that would feel good to you? Now I can do that. And honestly, look at I've been doing this a long time, everybody listening. Practice this. And the beautiful thing about it is you will get instant feedback.
Oh.
Instant feedback from people going, "Well, that's not right. I don't feel that way at all." Because you never say to somebody, "Oh, you feel this way," or "You must feel this way." And I'm going to say to the audience listening, pop quiz. Why is that bad? Taking away power.
Mm.
I'm going to tell you how you feel. And you're going to go, "I don't think so." And that's been one of the things about, women complaining about men mansplaining.
Mm.
It's a depowering thing, but men don't think of it that way. Men think of it as explaining and hearing, but women tend to hear it as overpowering and devaluing. Isn't that interesting? Something that subtle. So if you're a man, being able to say, "What are you feeling?" Oh, win you a lot more prizes, everybody.
Mm.
Big time.
Mm.
Big time.
Yeah, I remember a conversation I heard with Warren Buffett, and somebody's asking them how to win over, clients and people, and his point was, talk more about why they are great, not what they need. Uh, you know, uh, why are they where they are, and talk about how it was to get there. Another great tip that you have, by the way, that I have to start using, and everybody should, is the pronoun we. Instead of saying you need to do it, so what can we do about this? I mean, that just the power, it just evens it out, and it doesn't, you're not the bad person, I'm not the bad person, let's work at it together. It's so simple, Hesha, but it's powerful.
And profound, isn't it? And people
It's
don't do
profound.
it.
Yeah.
I use this in real life and consulting work and all that stuff, but in a mediation setting, I got people at each other's throats. And
Right.
when I first started mediating 35 plus years ago, I kinda had drunk the Kool-Aid about, "Oh, win-win problem solving, and we're all gonna do interspace negotiating, and we're gonna listen to each other. Ooh," it's like,
Mm.
"Oh, for God's sakes." And I bought a round conference table thinking there'd be no sides. We'll all
Mm.
be around this round table working at a problem. Oh, people hated it. I had to sell that sucker within 6 months and buy a normal
Wow.
rectangle because people want their sides.
Right.
That's how I feel safe and I feel protected. That's what they want. And so when you use "we" subliminally, you're getting out of the Hatfields and McCoy nonsense. And I like to say there are no problems, just solutions waiting to be found. And I put the problem in the center of the table. And let's say I have a particularly thorny problem. And I'll say this to people. Let's say you're at an employee meeting or a board meeting or an HOA meeting. God bless, those things are terrible. All of them,
Yes.
right? What I would say is I would say, "Here's the problem. I'm putting it in the center of the table." And I would look around the table, and I would make eye contact with every single person. And I'm going to say,
Hmm.
"We are the smartest, most creative, most determined, most persistent, and most interested people in the outcome of this problem. Don't tell me we can't find a solution. I know we can. And working together, we can do it." Now, notice that took what? 12
Right.
seconds? And all of a sudden, I started blurring the boundaries of
Mm.
us versus them, because who's gonna say, "No, I don't accept that challenge. I'm dumb. I don't deserve a seat at this table." Nobody's gonna say that.
Right.
And it just starts that process, and then you're my opponent, you're my enemy, I don't like you. And then I find out we're both gluten-free and we both can't eat the pizza, so
Mm,
we ordered a special gluten-free cauliflower crust for us. What a weird little bonding when I thought you
right.
were terrible, but now we're kind of the same, you know? I once did a training for a government agency, and it was very early in the pandemic, and I did it by Zoom, and I'm trying to get people, engaged in the Zoom, and I had this whole PowerPoint training with fabulous stuff I was doing for them. And just as a whim, I just said, "You know what? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream?" And I had them put it in the chat feature, and people, there was, I don't know, 50 people or something, started writing it. Then I'm looking at the list, and I started joking, and I said, "Ooh, so these people are purists. They want pure vanilla, pure chocolate. But these, you like the soft, gooey, mushy caramel nut marshmallow things, right? Ooh, I got a few sherbet people. You guys lactose intolerant? Be interesting for you guys to be able to talk to each other."
Hmm.
And then it just segued into this beautiful conversation where there were people that didn't really like each other, but we both frickin' like Rocky Road. It was so interesting. And afterwards, I got lovely reviews and blah, blah, blah. The head of the office said, "You know what people like best? The stupid ice cream thing." Not the stupid
Mm,
and gold of all this great stuff. They loved the ice cream thing. And it was so interesting because it was such a simple, accessible thing that everybody can interact with and bond over and connect and not be so different from
hmm.
each other. And in our society right now, we are so polarized on
Yeah,
so
we
many
are.
issues. I'm just looking for commonalities. That's why, again, why I wrote this book and why I wanted it released now, just to create commonalities, make life, a little better in my little tiny corner circle of the world. And that's what well, if I can I segue into something a little darker?
Sure.
So, and I don't normally talk about this, but I'm very concerned about all this murder going on. These
Yeah.
mass murders. Apparently, the definition of a mass murder is 4 people killed.
Hmm.
I don't know if they came up with that number, but apparently that's the universally accepted thing. Um, and so, oh yeah, another shooting. Oh yeah, 12 people, 4 people, 7 people. And we're all going, what do we do? Oh, we should do gun control. We can't do gun control. You can't get anything done.
Right.
Nothing can happen. But my theory is that there were 100 people that touched that guy who went crazy. 100 people within the past month, from the clerk of the grocery store to a teacher to someone on the bus to a family member. And this angry, nasty person wasn't given any kindness at all,
Hmm.
given no grace at all. That guy in Uvalde who killed all those kids, before he left, he shot his grandmother in the face.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me about that relationship, right? And so, as best we can, like cells of the body are little round things that are all connected to each other, and they make this whole giant, massive organism, work. I have my little tiny spot on the planet, and in my little tiny spot, I want to try to influence ways that we can VUCS people, that we can we people, that we can do WOWs, ways out with dignity, that we
Hmm.
can align self-interest, that we can speak into the ears that are hearing us, all my little 20 tools that are in holding the calm, and then teach it to other people. So in my little sphere of influence, and now you know it, and you hit it in your little sphere of influence, maybe we can deter some guy from doing that. And we'll never know, really.
Right.
But I hope we do. And that's my story. And I'm sticking to it. Because at least I don't feel powerless sitting back, twiddling my thumb, saying, oh no, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? It's at least something every person listening here, we can do
Hmm.
in our little small circle of influence. I'm not going to, go to the World Bank and get some big whatever thing to happen. But in my circle of influence, and I encourage everybody in your circle of influence, try to spread a little bit of this holding the calm magic to reduce the tension and stress and misery that is happening in our society. And maybe, we can make things better and prevent some bad junk.
What a terrible tragedy would be for you to accumulate all this information and to keep it to yourself. That's why it's wonderful when people like yourself put it in a book like this and talk about it. Two of my favorite techniques that you talk about are the dinosaur and the sandwich. Let's talk about those.
Glad you like those. The sandwich technique I did not invent. I think it's been around probably since the time of the Greeks, you know?
Really?
But, what happens, though, is that most people do an open-faced sandwich, and that's why it fails. And I have a friend who wrote the foreword to the book for me, who, um, Colonel Mark Flinton was in charge of psychological operations for the US military. So this is, like, a pretty serious dude, and he and I are
Yes.
friends, and we talk a lot and stuff. And he says in the military, they call it a crap sandwich because you're giving them something and you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. Well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So it's a shorter, abbreviated form of VUCS. VUCS is good because it's the V and the U, and that it gets into a clarifying, asking questions, problem solving thing that could take 20, 30 minutes on a problem that would otherwise take years to solve. So it's a very efficient use of time. The sandwich technique is a more sophisticated validation tool. So let's say I have to give you some bad news. Well, do I just blurt it out to you and just go, well, what the hell? You know? Or I want you to receive it and I want you to be okay with it. So I'm going to validate something important about you. And I'm going to tell you the difficult thing. And it's not going to be an open faced sandwich. I'm going to validate at the end. And the validation may be something as simple as I know that was really hard to hear. And I want you to know I'm really impressed with your maturity at being able to hear it or being able to accept it or trying to understand it, even though your feelings are hurt or it's not what you wanted to hear. That shows great depth of your personality. And I want you to know that I'm impressed with that. Or I feel for you. Or, I don't agree with the decision of corporate either. And unfortunately, that's what it is. And I know it has a terrible impact on you. And I'm sorry about that. So
Mm.
you make sure it's the whole sandwich. And it works beautifully. It works, and it works in all kinds of situations. The dinosaur technique I invented for my 6-year-old grandson. he he would just get big feelings,
Right.
and get so angry, and he couldn't express himself, and he'd scream and yell and have all the kid problems that you would have. So I just made it up because I'm trying to help him release emotions, and he's 6. So you can't logicate and rationalize with a 6-year-old. Like, there's no way. And think about when our amygdalas are hijacked. Aren't we 6-year-olds?
Mm.
No, get out of my way. I don't want that. You can't do that. I mean, we're 6-year-olds too, right? So I taught him that if you have these big feelings and you can't do anything about it right now, I taught him you have to have a kinesthetic portion to, I mean, this gets a little bit into the neuroscience of it, but feelings route through your body. And if you can uh, change the synaptic patterns um, in actually the parasympathetic nervous system, you literally cause a break in the electrical charge cruising through
Mm.
your body. That's why I'm really mad at you that, I just got fired, but then a brick drops on my foot. I'm only thinking about my foot.
Mm.
Right? So it breaks. So I taught what can I do to
Hmm.
a 6-year-old? And then now it works in business settings. You take your hands and you fold them, and the little nails at the end of your hands, you dig it into the fatty, fleshy part of your palm. And you dig it hard, like as hard as you possibly can. That little tiny pinch, it's almost like somebody putting a rubber band on and snapping it.
Mm.
You give yourself a little small physical thing to interrupt the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems so it stops the flow of whatever's happening to where you feel powerless and you can't breathe. After you do that, and I had to come up with something, so I told him, we're dinosauring it out. We're dinosauring it out. That's all there is to it. We're dinosauring it out. And I talk about it in the book, and I'm teaching, other people because, let's say you're in a meeting and that windbag won't stop talking and it is irritating. Dinosaur it out.
Mm.
Let's say you're with a difficult person who's ranting and raving about something. Dinosaur it out.
Hmm.
It helps.
Seems so simple. I had a dentist as a child. I had one, and then I went to another, and whenever he administered Novocaine, right before the pinch happened, he would shake my lip and my cheek. So I would concentrate on that, wouldn't feel the pinch at all. Just kind of redirecting another way. But, I'm in the tech business. I have a business owner, and talk about the poop sandwich that we talked about earlier, and that method where you kind of give good and then a bad and then good. That it's very, very, very common, just common way of doing it, and I like the way you set it up. But the dinosaur, um, that's just really good. I have to sit in some of these meetings where some of these professionals, I'll call them professionals, just like to hear themselves talk, Hesha, and they go on for a long time and say nothing
I
other
know.
than kind of brag. And you have to sit through it, and that's going to be my technique from now on. Just kind of the reason why you say dinosaur, I can only imagine because you're thinking of the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the short arms.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm, exactly
yeah,
right,
yeah.
exactly right, and I'm a big believer. I mean, I wrote in the book about visual, kinesthetic, and auditory learners. It's like, here's an iPhone, here's a Samsung. Both
Right.
smartphones, but completely different operating systems, and that's how our brains work. We're either visual learners, we learn by seeing, we're auditory learners, we learn by hearing, or we're
Mm.
kinesthetic learners, we learn by doing, and so when I'm talking to people, I suss that out right away, and then I talk to them in their language. And so I try to use very visual analogies because if I'm talking, like right now, I'm doing a lot of talking. So the auditory people are going, rock on, this is great, right? The visual people are probably zoning in and out. The
Mm.
kinesthetic people are really zoning in and out. So I will do things like on a podcast, I will have people actually raise their hands, not just click the little reaction thing, type something in the chat because I need their hands moving.
Mm.
And for the visuals, I just use so many visual analogies that it, oh, this one just popped into my head. I don't think I wrote about it in the book, and it's hilarious. Can I share it? Because I haven't thought about this in years.
Please.
That's so funny. Oh my God. Years ago, geez, 30 something years ago, I think, I mediated a slip and fall case. I think it was a Target. I think it was one of those kind of stores where somebody had vomited and some lady was walking, didn't see it, and slipped and fell and hurt herself.
Mm.
And so the insurance company was viewing it as a standard slip and fall case, which is worth X amount of dollars. They have grids in this city, in this age, and this whatever, it's worth that amount of money. And they were ignoring that it wasn't just water she fell in, but it was vomit. And
Mm.
so they couldn't get it settled, amongst themselves. So they bring me in. And when I'm talking with the insurance agent, he can't hear. He just can't hear it. So I said, "Okay, you know what I would do if I were the plaintiff's lawyer? I would somehow get a jar of vomit, big jar, one of those big mason jars, and I'd get, I don't know, everyone in my office to go vomit and somehow get a giant jar of vomit, and I would put it and I'd make it chunky." And I started using visual. I don't wanna do it to gross everyone else out who's listening to
Sure.
us, but I talked a lot in visual words about what it looked like, what it smelled like, chunky, all that kind of stuff, and it's on the counter. He's starting to look green. I mean, just green. And I said, "And you know what I might even do? I might even take it up to the jury and take the lid off so there's a smell." Now, of course, the other lawyer would object because it's not the same vomit that she fell in, but my point would have been made. So after
Mm.
spending 30 minutes talking about vomit in a really rich, visceral way, he came up with more money.
Mm.
I haven't
Speak
thought of that story in
That's
decades.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Speak into the ears that hear you is what you
Yeah.
say, and this is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Incredible. Another great piece of advice. You have your web, your YouTube is great. You kind of give these tips, and you've got a lot of great content. One of the great things is ask for their advice. It's worth a dozen roses.
Isn't it? Isn't that, people pay McKinsey and Company and Deloitte and all these things millions of dollars for advice. And there are
Mm.
people who will give it to you for free
Mm.
if you only ask and you only know how to ask. And again, we don't do that and we don't tend to take advice very well. And why again is that? Because it's either unsolicited or we feel powerless. Let me
Mm.
tell you what to do. Let me explain it to you. You know what you should do? And we kind of go, "Ugh," and training yourself to go, what should I do? Now I listen to you. I have 100% of the power. I can take it, I can discard it, I can do anything I want with that. But I'd rather have the data than not have the data, because maybe I
Mm,
can glean something decent out of it or make you feel good for giving it to me. And I don't even have to respond. I don't have to say, well, I will take it, or I won't take it, or you're right, or you're wrong. I can just go, well, that's very good advice. Thank you. And then I can go do the heck I want.
right.
And it is amazing. You will learn a lot by doing that.
Very true. And all too often, sometimes people are afraid to ask advice because they're afraid if they don't take it, that the other person will be, upset. You just kind of want to, hear what they're going to say and then you decide. You also talk a lot about how stories do a good job of explaining a lesson or explaining something that needs to happen where you're not saying this is what you should do. And I remember in the infancy of my company, we were going to get a larger office. Now my father's an Italian immigrant, got his first pair of shoes when he was 12, poor farmer. And so I said, Dad, we're thinking about getting a bigger office. And he says, Tony and Luigi were buying watermelon in Switzerland for 2,000 lire. And then they were coming to Milano and they were selling it for 2,000 lire. And after a month, Tony says to Luigi, we're not making any money. And Luigi says, we should have a bigger truck. So this was his way of saying, you don't need a bigger office. You're fine the way you are. I think this is the example that's given there. So it's very interesting how we learn by stories as well.
We so do. The Bible, the Torah, the Bhagavad Gita, the Book of Mormon, the Buddhist Dhammasalas, every spiritual teaching teaches in stories. Jesus taught in stories.
Yeah.
We just, like I could sit there and go, now you should do,
Mm,
and you will not
mm,
remember it at all. But I tell you to VUC yourself. You're gonna remember that. I'm gonna tell you, deal with conflict right away. You're gonna remember the spaghetti sauce story,
yeah.
right? I have one more quick
Dinosaur.
one I can give you that's not in the book, so it's kind of like a
Please.
bonus. So, because I heard it after the book was already finished, on NPR's Hidden Brain, and I thought, "Oh my god, that's just so perfect." So, there was a couch company that sold very expensive bespoke couches, 20 and 30 grand. You could change the piping, you could change the length, the arms, the fabric, whatever, whatever. And people would go through to the point of sale, and a huge percentage would not complete the sale. Well, the company's really frustrated. And so, what do we usually do when we have a problem? We're like a car. We either have gas and we make it go more, or we brake and we stop. The vast majority of us don't stop. We just put more gas on it. I'm going to speak louder. I'm going to speak more forcefully. I'm going to have more sales. I'm going to try to convince you. I'm going to have more discounts. I'm going to push this. I'm going to do that. And it's all me, I, boom. Didn't change a doggone thing. This is what we do as human beings. Excuse me. So finally, someone at the company said, you know what? Let's do the bomb detector thing. Let's diagnose. So they had somebody call all the people that went to the point of sale and didn't complete and ask them, do you mind if I ask why you didn't complete the sale? The number one overwhelming reason for people that were wealthy enough to afford a $20,000 couch was bada boom, bada bang. They didn't know what to do with the old couch.
All right.
Now that I know that, solution's obvious. When you
Mm,
buy the new one, I take away your old one. Sales skyrocketed. They didn't need promos and sales and all that kind of stuff. So I like that story because it's so clean and
mm,
efficient, but so much. Remember when I talked about earlier, is somebody trying to win or trying to not lose?
mm.
Looking at just that. In the book, I have tons and tons and tons of stories, and these are all battle tested. I've used them. Otherwise, I didn't put them in the book. Take them, take my stories, use them because they work. And instead of saying to somebody, like, remember the chapter on be a grown up, you don't say, now we all need to be mature
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
all need to be a grown up, and we all need to listen. Yeah, 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 yeah. Get away from me, school marm. No one wants to hear that. Can I tell you a story? And then you tell them a story,
Mm.
and recognition lights up in their eyes. That reminds me a time of blah, 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 blah. And I always ask because I want you to hear what I have to say. May I tell you a story? I thought of a story that would really work May I share it with you?
Hmm.
Now the person says yes, their ears are open. And as you tell them the story, they're not rehearsing in their head anymore, which is the very first question you asked me. They're not rehearsing in their head anymore because they're interested in the story. It's just human beings, we are fascinating
We
creatures.
are.
Fascinating creatures. And we share 99% of our DNA with chimpanzees, which I
Yes.
find hilarious. Hilarious, I tell you.
Yeah, when you wanna humble yourself a little bit, remind yourself of that fact, you know?
Indeed.
You grew up in a non-ideal childhood, lots of conflict, lots of you kinda describe as tumultuous and, made you go into law and mediation and then you had a hysterectomy, I believe, and it put you on your off your feet for a while. So that's when you decided to put pen to paper and put all this great knowledge. So we have that to thank. I wonder how discipline. We talk a lot about discipline on the podcast. I lost a lot of weight when I was starting my business. People ask me how I did it, like they want some secret, like there's some quick answer. And I just say discipline. Doctor said I wasn't going to see my daughter graduate. That's all. I was pre-diabetic, pre-hypertension, wasn't taking care of myself. I just turned things around. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Hesha.
I thought you said that beautifully because every top performer, it's discipline. Nobody
Mm,
wants to wake up early and go work out. Nobody wants to sit and do 25 squats when you're tired. Or, quite frankly, I don't feel like listening to you today. You're long winded. You're annoying. I've heard that story 15 times. I'm tired. I'm cranky. Get to the point. I don't want to bend over backwards and give you something. Like, why the heck should I give it to you?
mm,
All of those things, it's the discipline of if you're disciplined about how you work out, you're disciplined about how you eat, you're disciplined about how you behave. My craft and what I do in my work, I'm very disciplined. And what I want to tell our listeners, I fail all the freaking time. I am human. There's a quantum physics talks about after every great expansion, there is a contraction. It's the undulation of the universe. And it 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. That is always the way that happens. And I have learned now, I'm 64 years old. I give myself a little grace now. I didn't really start doing that till I hit 60. I give myself a little grace. I screwed up. And oh my God, how could I have screwed up? I know better. How could I have lost my temper? How could I do? Give myself a little grace and go, I'm 64. By the time I'm 70, maybe I'll have this down.
mm,
That's how I really look at it because I give myself grace. And if I want a piece of chocolate cake, I'm going to do it. But then
yeah,
tomorrow, I'm going for salads.
yeah.
If I lose my temper with somebody, I'm going to go back and I'm going to make it up to them. And I'm going to, it's interesting in the Bible, it talks about, I think if you steal somebody's goat or harm their goat, you have to give them back 5. And I
Hmm,
always kind of laughed at that until neuroscience has proven that out.
hmm,
For every bad encounter you have with somebody, you need 5 positive just to get it back to stasis. It really is a very interesting 5-to-1 thing. And what
hmm.
happens is we do something bad. Well, I said, "Oh, sorry." I mean, can't we move on? Nope. No, you can't. You need to do 5 good things to just get back to stasis. That's just human beings. And what I find interesting is we spend so much time now talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and all that, which is good and important and necessary for our society. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I want to go deeper below the externalities. What is common in the human experience? Everything you and I have been talking about on this podcast is common. I don't care your race. I don't care your ethnicity. I don't care
Mm,
your gender. I don't care your sexual orientation, your socioeconomic class, your height, your weight. None of it is relevant. It's the human experience. And I
mm,
find that just fascinating, And then how can we do it better? Which doesn't mean I don't get annoyed sometimes and someone doesn't aggravate me because I'm human like everybody else. But these holding the calm tools gave me power.
mm.
I don't feel powerless. I have the ability to impact things around me. And isn't it better to go through life that way than the alternative? At least that's my 2 cents.
That's well said, Hesha. And you look great for 64. Will you still need me? Will you still feed me? I hope I have your energy at that
That's good.
at that age. Uh, what motivates you, Hesha Abrams? What motivates you?
That's the first time someone's asked me that question, and I'll tell you, I strive for excellence in my own life. Even though I just said I give myself grace now, I've learned.
Mm,
But there's a story I tell in the book because one of the editors wanted to take it out, and I went, no, no, because this is very personal to me. My husband has a Navy SEAL friend, and Navy SEALs are supposed to be able to tread water until they die. And so my husband said to the guy, "So, how long can you tread water?" And he said, "I don't know. I'm not dead yet." And I thought about that for
mm,
me. How big can I get? How broad can I get? How curious can I get? How expansive can I get? How kind can I get? How forgiving can I get? I don't know. I'm not dead yet.
mm.
And that's honestly what drives me is my own self-improvement and my own learning. How much more can I see? How much more can I understand? Then that makes life kind of rich, I
Yeah.
think.
So your motivation is to continually learn.
Indeed. Indeed.
As is mine. And I find that as I get older, I have more questions than answers.
Wisdom, my friend. I feel the same way. I was cocky and arrogant when I was younger. I knew everything. And the
Mm,
older I get, a gentler hand on the joystick, and I have a
right.
lot more questions, and I see both sides more often. I'm less judgmental. I'm less arrogant, and uh, it's a gentler way of being. It's a little easy, and it hasn't like in here listening to me, it hasn't lost my fire, hasn't
Right.
lost my passion and my drive. But I, the one more story. Do we have time for one more story?
Please,
These things
please.
keep popping into my head, and I don't think this one's in the book, so it's a nice little bonus. This was during, I'm pretty sure the Vietnam War. I should fact check this, either Vietnam or Korean War. I can't remember, but I checked it to know it was an accurate story. Vietnam. It was Vietnam. It's Vietnam. There was a cholera epidemic in Vietnam, and so the United States sent over tons of vaccine for what am I saying? Is cholera? Maybe it was smallpox. It was smallpox vaccine, and inoculated everybody in the South. Well, the North didn't have any of it, and so there was a MASH unit, a medical unit, right at the North border, right by the Viet Cong, near North Vietnam, which was our enemy. Right? It was so bad; it was our enemy, and yeah, we were killing each other, so it was clearly an enemy. And they said, we don't care about boundaries, we don't care about borders. We have extra vaccine. We're going to go bring it to the village across the border, and maybe that will help create some dialogue. So they went over to the border. They met with the men, and the men of the village said, "Get away from us, you American devils, with your disgusting medicine. You're probably poisoning us. We don't want it. We don't need it. We're going to let you live, but leave."
Hmm.
So they left. And the doctors thought, we watched some of the women, and I think the women would take it. So they waited until the men were on a raiding party. They went across the border. The women said yes. So they inoculated all the women and children of the village. Well, the smallpox vaccine leaves a mark on the arm. And so the men came back and were enraged. And as we've been talking about, felt powerless, right? They actually pulled together all the women and children of the village and took a machete and chopped off the arms that had that mark.
Wow.
And the next morning, the MASH doctors, who were feeling very cocky and very self satisfied with themselves, came out, and there was a huge pile of bloody limbs.
Wow.
I think about that story sometimes. Like, don't be so cocky and arrogant. There's a corollary to that that's a little lighthearted, so we don't end on such a heavy note, about Pete Best and the Beatles. Pete Best was the drummer before Ringo,
Mhm.
and he was a good drummer, and he still is a good drummer now. He plays stuff, and his parents said, "What are you doing with a bunch of ragtag hippie weirdos playing in garage bands?" And they pressured him to quit. I think it was going to accounting school or something to make something of his life. And then the Beatles got Ringo.
Yeah.
And so I think about that. As a parent, you want to give good advice to your kid. And are you the parents of Pete Best? And maybe the Beatles never would have made it with him.
Mm,
Maybe they needed Ringo. Who knows? But I find the older I get, I'm a little more gentle with my advice because there's a whole lot of factors that I am not aware of.
mm.
So, a little gentle.
Yes. Yeah. I tend not to give advice. I just say something similar happened to me, and this is what I did, and this is what I learned. So I try, when you're part of these peer groups, you try not to give advice directly. Just, kind of this is what I did in this situation, and hopefully they can glean some experience and knowledge from that. And how do you measure success?
See, that's such a great question. When I was young, of course, it was money and
Yeah.
fame and, the normal kind of success. And then, marriage, children. I've thought about that a lot, as I've aged too. And all the studies, all of them say that longevity and happiness are directly related to relationships, directly. So having good, powerful, meaningful relationships in your life are what the science says, leads to happiness and meaning. Now, some people go, humbug. I don't need it, don't want it. Okay, that's your choice. For me, relationships are real important, but I like depth. I don't really care about who got voted off the island, and what the Kardashians are doing is of zero interest to me. But people that want to talk politics, religion, ideas, philosophy, ecology, archaeology, I mean, things that are interesting. Now we're just human beings all on a different path, kind of bumping into each other. And I find that I like that. And sometimes relationships come and go. People get divorced, they get remarried. Friend that was a best friend all of a sudden isn't anymore. That's the undulation of the universe. And I used to get very stressed about it. I used to cling
Mm,
to loss or change. I didn't want that. The older I'm getting, the more I just accept it now as the undulation of the universe. And that, like, there are these little emails that go around all the time that talk about a friend for a reason, a friend for a season, a friend for a night. I think there's a lot of that. And surrendering to that, I find I'm happier, I'm more relaxed, and my relationships are better. And my life is richer when I'm not clinging, which doesn't mean I don't still cling because I'm still
mm,
human. And then I just
mm.
got to hold the calm and remind myself, let go, girlfriend, let go.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time today. This is just I was so excited when you accepted this. Love your book. I love your message. How can we get in touch with you?
Thank you. Holdingthecalm.com. So calm as in CALM.
Right.
And I don't sell lists to anybody, and I'm not looking for eyeballs because I have a regular job. So this book literally is my love letter to humanity,
Yeah.
just getting it out there. And so you can sign up, and whenever I feel like it, I send out little 1 minute tips, videos. I send out little articles. Whenever I'm doing a couple times a month, kind of send something like
Great.
that out. And then every podcast I do, every interview, every TV interview gets posted on the website. So people like what they heard, they can go listen to whatever it is they want to do, and hear it from different perspectives and different focuses. And then the one thing I would tell people that I did is I created a discussion guide in the back of the book. And some people wanted me to do it as a separate workbook and charge for it. And I refused. I said, nope, I'm doing it for free. And the reason is that I insisted the book be cheap. It's a paperback. I wanted it easily, inexpensive and easy for people to get. And it's designed for volume orders. So you're an HOA, you're a church, you're a synagogue, you're a mosque, you're a corporation, you're a team. It's nothing. That's what, 10, $15 a book, And we have it, they contact us. We've got wholesalers we can put you in touch with it. It's even cheaper. And if everyone reads it and then you go through the discussion guide, all of a sudden you just got a training and didn't have to
Mm,
pay one. And it get these things richer because we practiced with each other. Now we have a lexicon with each other. We can actually use it. Let's say you get all hot and bothered, Joey. All I have to say is, hey, Joey, I'll hold the calm with you.
right.
Boom. Boom. Spaghetti sauce, wiped up. Maybe that'll be the title of the next book. Spaghetti sauce, wiped up.
I encourage people to read the book. Go to your site. You've got excellent content too, and your tips and your video tips. You just do such a great job, and it's obvious. You make it clear that you're making pennies on the books here. You're making it clear. This is what I've learned. I think you could benefit from it, and go and get it, and make the world a better place. I really appreciate your time. I hope one day we get to have a couple. Your husband, who races planes, by the way, which if we get a cup of coffee when we meet face to face, that'd be great. Can't wait to hear about that as well. And thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure, Joe. You asked great questions. I felt like we were either having a cup of coffee or, depending on the time, a glass of wine.
Yes. Very good. You be well.
Be well. Bye.
Bye now. Thank you for listening and/or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources, and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.